In this final episode on Building Management System Tool, I'm going to show you some of the key Excel points to build the worksheet that we are showing here. Now, based on the previous two modules, we learned how to actually design the spreadsheet, figuring out how we're going to put the management tool together with our parameters, which are our performance criteria, and then all the different calculations. We're not going to go through and build out all the calculations. We're just going to show you some of the particular Excel features in order to build this. But you can see what we've done here is been able to create a chart that allows us to have performance criteria, and then based on using some of these different controls, we can actually change the values that we have throughout this sheet. But again, this was built on our original design, being able to have your gross income, taking away taxes, and then having all of the different month charges that would go against our performance criteria for debt. But you can see we've used a few controls here to control some of our inputs. And we've also used some conditional formatting and some charting. And what I'm going to do is really briefly show you a couple of these functions. We've also built, as an example on this particular sheet, the ability to go to another worksheet using hyperlinks. So for example, for calculating gas, we have the ability to go to a sheet where you can select what type of gas that you're actually going to be using, and then modify your miles driven per month to be able to update this number. So I have a template here that we're going to use. I'm just going to show you a couple of the functions. The first one, just like we learned before, being able to actually insert a control to be able to control the input. You have the ability to select underneath your form controls a slider, and if you take the slider and draw it with a lengthwise longer than it is tall, you have the ability to put this in here. And now one of the things about the slider is you have the ability to control a cell on the form. The problem with this is that it only goes in whole increments, so you can only increment by an integer at a time, a whole value. And we might want to go in percentages. And so this is just a little trick that we can use here. If we want our total debt to gross income to be 35% to 50%, what we can do is we can actually change the minimum and maximum values and control the value in a cell like, for example, E3, and we can use a calculated value over here to take E3 and divide it by a certain value, for in this case 200, so that we can now control this in half increments, so we can do half percentages. So this is just a little trick that you can use. You can use the same kind of functionality or feature when you want to go above 30,000, which is an issue that we'll have down here. In the original value that we have 57,500. We may want to go above 60,000. The slider only allows for, I believe, up to 30,000 as the total value. So if we modify the slider in here, minimum value 100, if we wanted to try to go to 60,000 and control this cell, it won't allow us to do that because it only allows it to go to 30,000. So a way around that is also you can take it up to 30,000, maybe change the increment to be $1,000 at a time. But what we'll do is we'll take the value and multiply it by 2 so that we can go above 30,000. In this case, we'd be able to go to 60,000 as the top value. So a couple little tricks there. Another trick or feature in Excel is to be able to do conditional formatting. If we wanted to take these values and show them as kind of bar charts next to the values, we can actually select the values, go back to Home, and under conditional formatting do data bars. Now you can still see the numbers here, but if you select this range and you go back into your conditional formatting, manage the rules, and if you edit the rule, you have the ability to do just show bar only. And in this case now, you'll just see the bars and not the actual values themselves. So that's a nice feature to actually be able to have here too. Another thing that you might want to do is to have a form. For example, gasoline. You may want to have somebody click on gasoline and bring up a form where they can fill in some information. If you have a sheet, in this case, if we were to just call this gasoline, and we wanted to be able to link to it, what we can do is we can select on gasoline, put in a hyperlink, and place in document. We can select the gasoline sheet. And now when I click on gasoline, it'll take me to the sheet. Now one of the things you'd want to do is make sure that you can put this go back to main page. You can really type anything you want here, but you would basically put a hyperlink to this to make sure that you go back to the sheet that you were actually looking at. In this case, sheet 7 was, I believe, the one that we were working with. And so if we select on gasoline, we can select go back, and we can go back and forth between these different forms. Now one other feature that we have on this form is the ability to select this little selection button and actually have values update over here. All we need to do in order to be able to have this functionality is go back into your developer tab and insert this button. And when you insert this button on a sheet, what it does is it allows you to have all these buttons that are mutually exclusive. So if you select one, none of the other ones can be selected. And you can actually use this particular control. In this case, you can link this to a particular cell, and if you are checked, you can actually have the value change in that particular cell. So you can actually be able to have the value connected to that particular cell and change it, and then you can build logic throughout your other sheet that if the particular cell equals a particular value, then you can update the sheet. One of the other things that we can do is put some conditional formatting on our performance criteria. One of the things that we had originally was a debt ratio that if we went above it would be considered basically not meeting our performance criteria. So what we can do is, in this case, we can come down here and do some conditional formatting. We can select this particular value and insert conditional formatting that says that if the value in the cell is greater than our total debt payment over here, which was 40%, we want that to be light red. And so now, if we take this value down below 22%, if we actually, let's go back and modify this so we can go all the way to 0. Let's take this below 22%, and now you see once we cross that threshold of 22%, it goes red under the debt to gross income performance criteria. So we're not going to go through all the details of the calculations on this form, but some of the key functions that are actually on the form are the control tabs, make it easy for a user to control the performance criteria, the ability to have conditional formatting that provides insight to the user when they've passed over a particular performance criteria, the ability to do conditional formatting for the different bars, and then also the ability to use forms so that you can select on a particular value and hyperlink between other Excel worksheets. Again, this is the final design element in building the management tool, but we've used the process going through the analysis phase, the design phase, and then implementation and training to provide a tool that can be used for management decision making.